So it's wonderful to be back, and it's also amazing to see some of my teachers back here as well. It's always nice to come back home and, 8 years feels like a long time, but it also feels like I graduated just yesterday. So it's got me in this very weird feeling. Now, what I want to talk about today and what I'm going to highlight is effectively that what you see today in front of you is the summation of all the people I met along the way, right? I think one key factor of success is all the people who touch your life and all the people's lives you touch in the process. So what I'm going to talk about is my journey from post-graduation of DPS and how I ended up coming back here. To start, when I graduated from DPS, I just finished commerce. I wasn't exactly the most social of people. I would be somewhat of an introvert, didn't have, too many friends, let's say. And when I'm on stages, I generally have an instrument and I'm not talking. So this also puts me in a very different position. When I went to Christ, I started finding my first band. I started getting more heavily involved in music. And we eventually started doing a lot of shows together, playing across the country. We did some tours across South India. We've released an album together and multiple songs, as she had mentioned earlier. But one thing that was important to highlight was I had failed multiple times. When I first started playing, I was horrible at my instrument. And it wasn't just that. I started practicing on my own, right? So for the first 6 months, I was locked up in my room with my instrument and I was practicing. Now, I became as good as what you'd expect as someone who'd only been playing for 6 months alone in their room. But then I met two people who were incredible bandmates who later on had my back no matter what, no matter where I went. And they were people who helped me sit down with my instrument. And one of them's in the picture that's there on the top left. He played the mandolin for about 15 years before I met him. And when I sat down with him, he taught me a lot, immense amount. I started learning different techniques from him. How to play my instrument was translated from how he played his instrument. What I realized was just 3 months of sitting with him, my growth was exponential. It wasn't just mediocre anymore. It was something I could actually take to a stage and I could actually show something of myself. Through him, we ended up forming our band, which was an 8-piece or a 9-piece band, and we started doing a lot more shows. The first thing I would like to highlight here, which is just one concept that I'm going to keep hammering over and over, is that people really matter. It's the people who you meet, people who challenge you, people who question you, and people who help you grow. Keep in mind, it's a big difference between people who attack you and people who do not give you constructive criticism. These are people who would challenge you, who would question you and push you a bit, but they push you from a well-intentioned place. Through them, we formed our band. We did a bunch of shows together. We played 13 competitions, won all 13 of them. Then we started playing at Hard Rock Cafe, started playing at Fandom in Koramangala and a bunch of other venues throughout India. In fact, one of the highlights was the picture on the bottom left, where you see me playing to an audience of close to about 2,000 or 3,000 people. We opened for a heavy metal band that was based out of the UK, and they had flown down to India. But there's also the consequences of when you meet these kinds of people, right? The one consequence about music was your stimulus was always external. How do you know you're a good musician when you do live shows? Well, it comes from how your audience receives you, right? How, when you're on stage, does everyone scream your songs with you? Does everyone jump around with you? Does the energy kind of vibe together? One problem that we all learned from that, because we were all incredibly young, was that we kept basing our results or our rewards or our feelings off of how other people perceived ourselves. Which meant that if I thought I was a good musician, it was not because of my inherent skill set that I had learned anymore, but it was because of how people saw me play. And this is also one of the dangers of being surrounded by people who are similar to you and share the same vision but have different backgrounds, is that you imbibe everything that comes along with it, right? Now with musicians, you're extremely creative, but you might find yourselves in environments that you do not like or that are not meant for you. So I did something pretty drastic. Over the course of 3 years, as we became better at our craft, we became a lot more arrogant as people. We always thought that the audience knew us the best, and whatever they said was what we had to enact or what we had to do. So our arrogance was through the roof, our stubbornness was incredibly high, and our creativity started dropping. So we all made a big call, or at least I made a big call, which followed up with the rest of the band, was that I quit music for a bit. I wanted to really take a breath. I didn't want to be in that kind of environment anymore, and I disconnected myself from it. This is where I realized something incredibly important, that there's an old adage that 95% of your environment dictates who you become, and 5% of it really comes from your true intentions and your true character, especially early on in your formative years. College is a beautiful experimentation ground, but that's also where you need to learn to set up your boundaries, otherwise you can get caught up in the wrong spaces very quickly. So, one thing, people will challenge you, surround yourself by those kinds of people. People will uplift you, surround yourself by those kinds of people. But always remember that when you're seeking diverse experiences and diverse expertise, that your mission, your core drive, your core interest between the different people you interact with, that core interest is the same. My musician friends all came from different kinds of backgrounds, but we had one singular thought, one singular motive together, which was to make some really good music, and we achieved that. Now, I left music, I found a new hobby, motorcycling, and it was the complete antithesis to music, right? Instead of being in a room crowded with people where you're performing to an audience of 500, 600, it's just you alone on the road. Just you, your helmet, your thoughts. I'll get into music in a bit, and what I want to go to is the next chapter of my life after Christ and after working for a bit, which was my MBA. Here what you see on the left, is a professor or an educator, not in the traditional sense. But he basically helped me really transform my mindset into being someone who could attend one of the best business schools in the world today. His name is Mr. Sandeep Gupta, and he is someone who's extremely driven, extremely passionate, and very aggressive to what he believes. And what he believes is that no matter what kind of student you are, no matter your background, no matter your grades, no matter your baggage that comes along with you, is that every student has the potential to crack one of the top institutes in the world, be it Harvard, Stanford, MIT, INSEAD, or wherever. Now, INSEAD last year was number 2 in the world as the best business school. It beat Harvard, it beat Stanford, it was only second to Wharton. Now, me as a person, I was a very average student. When I graduated from when I graduated from DPS, my grades was 80%, and when I graduated from Christ, I got 58%. Naturally, with those kinds of grades, when you look at aiming for the top business school in the world, you might have some reservations thinking that it's not going to happen. Sandeep was someone who I enlisted with for GMAT coaching. Ideally, when you're targeting some of the best institutes, you need to clear a certain entrance exam. It might be the SATs, it might be the GMAT, it might be the GRE, and so on. So I registered with Sandeep for the GMAT, but what he taught me was so much more, not just the GMAT. What he taught me was that it was your mindset that was extremely important. Everything else will follow. But he taught me how to really start thinking for yourself. And the biggest question that he asked me was, why? That question was, why do you want to go to INSEAD? What is the purpose of it? And what is the purpose that you're seeking out of it? Does it really make sense to go to INSEAD? Is that really what you want to do? Now, I knew that I had to get an MBA, but I didn't know why I wanted to go to INSEAD in the first place. And my mindset back then was very regressive. I was thinking, might as well just do an MBA from a tier 2, tier 3, be very stable, be very simple, don't take any risks, nothing grand, right? No dreams of grandeur. But Sandeep taught me otherwise, and he taught me how to bifurcate my friend groups, how to effectively be aligned with only people who think the right way that you want to think, and coming back to the same point, surrounding yourself with the right kind of people. It's better to surround yourself with the right kind of people or be alone rather than surrounding yourself with the wrong kinds of people, because then getting out becomes incredibly difficult. So that's what I did. For 6 months, or close to 8 months, I deleted all of my social media handles. I completely fell off the face of the planet. I didn't go on any motorcycle rides, I didn't do anything. I only focused on my GMAT. I was only surrounded by people like Sandeep, where we were all incredibly driven, where he was mentoring us and telling us, look, this is how you can guide yourself, and this is why getting a top-tier MBA would be extremely helpful for you. He helped me flip that mindset. And all of a sudden, within 8 months, I suddenly got an admit to INSEAD, which blew my mind because my classmates were CEOs, CXOs, whatever it was. They were pilots. They were people who were, leading. For example, there was one of my classmates led Roche, which is a big pharma company, right? There were people from all sorts of places in the world. And then there was me, who was someone who, graduated from Christ with 58% and, was a musician for a bit. But it was incredible because I met all sorts of people with all sorts of backgrounds, with very different perspectives on life. INSEAD is an institute where 1 in 5 classmates are from another country. We have 90 to 92 nationalities on campus, which meant an immense difference in perspectives. For example, Indian families, when we think of taking a loan, it immediately shudders for a few people, right? Thinking about collaterals, thinking about the what if this doesn't pan out. I had a friend of mine from the Netherlands who was there on 3 different loans. One was a student loan for his education fees. One was a personal loan for his living expenses. And then the third was a miscellaneous loan for whatever other expenses came up from traveling or whatever it was. Similarly, I met a lot of my friends who were from Africa who had families held at gunpoint at one point in time, just because of the nature of where they were from. Now, when you sit down together over dinner or drinks and then you start talking, you start realizing that they start challenging your thoughts, your beliefs of why you had a certain notion or a certain idea in your head. And those are the kinds of people that you want to surround yourself with. It's not people who are undermining you or demeaning you in any way, but they're just asking you, why do you think that way, right? And you need to be open and receptive enough to understand whether your previous thoughts that you had are still valid or whether they need to be changed a bit more, just because of the new perspectives you're getting inbound. I have a mentor from INSEAD. She graduated in 2008, who's a powerhouse of a woman, an absolute, I mean this in the best way, of course, but an absolute demon. She is incredibly driven. She is incredibly inspirational. What she does now, she's a professional storyteller. That's her job. She works in Singapore. She coaches some of the world's top leaders, CXOs and CEOs, on basic storytelling. The way she worked on this was when we were on campus, and she had come for her alumni event. But when we were on campus, she just asked me a simple question. She said, look, you're optimizing for your future. That's my headspace. I was thinking of myself 10, 15 years down the line. She said, you're optimizing for your future. But imagine you had only 1 year left to live. What would you do? And that was incredible. 1 year left to live. I immediately said, look, then I don't know. And I thought I wanted to travel. So that's what I did. For a year, within my year, I rented a motorcycle for a year and I traveled across 14 different countries. About 22,000 kilometers over the span of 2 months, and I was just camping out of my motorcycle. Phenomenal. I met people from all sorts of parts of Western Europe. I became friends with a lot of different motorcycle clubs, and I understood how they live life and their different culture than what we had. And it was an incredible experience. And then I started keeping in touch with them, and they became my network of people who always had my back. They said, okay, if you were thinking of, what is your end goal? What do you want to be in life? They always held me to it if they saw me falling somewhere else. Now I come back to my motorcycle club. There are another group of folks where previously I was in music when my average age of my friend circle was in their early 20s. But all of a sudden, the average age of my friend circle became people in their mid-40s and early 50s. That was, again, another big jump. It was people who had seen life, who were pretty seasoned through what they saw. And they taught me a lot more about myself than I could ever imagine. And that's also what a hobby, where you have absolutely no distractions, right? It's just you, the road, and your thoughts. All your responsibilities go out the window, and your only responsibility is to survive on the road. When I was in that kind of space, they taught me the most important part about the people that you're with. When I look back at life and what's gotten me here today, is just the summation of all the people that I've met along the way and all the people I'm incredibly grateful for meeting. So that's it. Thank you so much. And yeah.